The developers over at Square Enix have laid their bed, so they're going to lie in it. I'm saying this not from a malicious perspective, but this is just the reality that the gaming industry has served lately. In fact, when you think about what all is going on, you got to realize that the so-called PlayStation fans for some reason are a little restless. I'm going to leave names out of this except for Astro Cyborg, who has, graciously clipped a few things here and there. That's as much as I'm going to say. He's a friend of the channel and does a lot of work on Twitter, basically following and documenting fanboyism in some aspects. Now, guess what I've been seeing on Twitter and what I just saw in this particular case is that there are PlayStation fanboys that are continuing to, in a sense, put this thing out there saying, oh, well, look, Final Fantasy 16 is not even among the, highest sold games on the Xbox store. It's not even selling that much. And to that, I'm going to myself, well, has any of these so-called PlayStation fanboys asked themselves, since Final Fantasy 16 launched, how many other games have been made available to other consumers on other platforms? I mean, if they would just go ahead and, in a sense, maybe think about that, then you'll see that what they're doing is them trying again to do something else other than reflect on what I think is the abysmal direction in terms of game releases and content delivery that PlayStation is going to engage in, including all of the live services that they want to go ahead and bring out. So look at it right here, ladies and gentlemen. June 2023, Final Fantasy 16 launches, right? June of 2023. If we go on Steam and look at how many games have launched since 2023, let's just say halfway to 2020 through 2023, about 7,000 games had launched. By the end of the year, there were 14,186 games that had launched on Steam. The following year, while Final Fantasy, whatever the heck, 16 was still hanging out on the PlayStation ecosystem, had not yet showed up to the PC. By then, over 10,000 games had launched on PC. So when the game showed up and we looked at the SteamDB concurrent numbers, it was kind of weird. I mean, it kind of sat with God of War Ragnarok. When it came down to it, it wasn't really too impressive in terms of concurrent players. And concurrent players, we know, is not a good metric to be able to judge a game's success and sales. Yes, we know. However, compared to, say, other games like Elder Scrolls Remastered, which we could say that the name Final Fantasy and Elder Scrolls probably carry as much legacy in terms of their timeline, this number is absolute junk. It's a dumpster fire. Why? Because PC gamers were already sitting on thousands of games that had already come out in between that exclusivity time frame and an exclusivity time period. So anybody who's on this side saying, oh, these PlayStation gamers, these Xbox gamers are not buying games, this Final Fantasy, you got to understand that these guys basically went ahead and took a bag to keep this game away from the Xbox players. And the Xbox players right now are inundated with a whole bunch of games. Since that game showed up on the scene in June of 2023, has anybody taken a look at what Xbox gamers have been afforded in that time? They had to play Starfield. They had to. Well, they had Starfield available to them. Since then, they've had Indiana Jones, a Call of Duty game. They got a Doom Dark Ages game. They got a Ninja Gaiden Black remaster. And a host of other games that have shown up on their platforms, whether it be Game Pass or whether it be Xbox Game Studios. They've had games to play. And so when the game shows up on the Xbox store and it's not charting at number one after 2 years of pretty much ignoring a paying fan base, I'm shocked that the game is still around the 20-somethingth in terms of the top paid games on the Xbox store. I'm actually surprised. I thought the game will probably go live in, some desolate land because people are just playing other games. Not because they have any malice. It's just like, well, just play other games. So in my opinion, I think it's still a flattery to the developers that made that game and eventually brought it after a few years, that the game is even in the top 50 games. I think it's like number 27 after all is said and done. This particular situation, ladies and gentlemen, right here, is what you're going to start seeing a lot of the PlayStation fanboys do. The big talking heads. I'm not talking about PlayStation fans. The ones that are like, basically playing games, looking at what's going on. They're going to continue to try to find ways to ensure that they can still, keep Xbox relevant on their, on their lips. What's funny is, what sales are they even expecting compared to their own platform? Because if Final Fantasy was so successful at the same rate and cadence at which they were selling consoles, they wouldn't even need to bother. Because again, here they are looking at, 30 something million Xbox consoles sold Xbox players and saying, well, you see, y'all aren't going to buy it. What sort of nonsense? What sort of nonsense are these folk doing? Let me go ahead and just say something. If these people, and again, this is what every PlayStation fanboy is going to be hearing right now. Look in your own kitchen. Look in your house. If what it is that if everything you think, that Xbox has failed at is so important to you, why not just look in your own kitchen? Why bother? Why bother with Xbox at this moment in time? Why not look at the fact that they were, at the time, over 3 dozen PlayStation consoles that were sold. And till date, Final Fantasy, 16's developers had to basically go ahead and first disband the unit that made the game, then go tell their shareholders that they didn't make enough money from the game. And they knew they were stuck in exclusivity while their developers kept, teasing that they wanted to bring the game to Xbox. It's like while the game was exclusive, the sales were so bad that Yoshi P and the developer for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth kept making statements towards wanting to do multiplayer. That's how bad it was. Just like the Stellar Blade developers, who said that they hoped that the game was going to sell more on Steam than the PS5 version. If these PlayStation fanboys have not yet realized that devs are going hungry when they put their games exclusive on PlayStation, then I don't know when they're going to. Because all this talk with Black Myth Wukong, like, well, if the money had Black Myth Wukong, the developers wouldn't be talking about other platforms if it was actually a deal. While in front of them, the developers on Shift Up and the developers over with the Final Fantasy thing alluded to other platform versions of their game, which is just weird. So if exclusivity was all that, right? Why are these developers all hoping that the fans over there and talking to the fans? Because developers at the core of it still want their games to be sold. And now, guess what people are saying? People are now no longer wanting to call it money hatting. I've been having people in my comment section try to basically swap me down and say, hey, shut up. Stop calling it money hatting. Call it bribery. And I'm like, guys, I don't want to go that far. But it seems like with all of the nonsense going on, it's probably the outlook that we need to start taking at this point. So I'd say, for those of you who, your obsession is with Xbox users and whatever, I'd say you got to tone it down. You have no ground nor leg to stand on. When a game that stays exclusive on your platform has developers mentioning other platforms. Did I tell you about the Astrobot developer who said to PC gamers, to make a lot of noise? Maybe PlayStation was going to, in a sense, probably, maybe put the game, on PC. So all this talk, all this talk that everyone is basically, throwing out there is just so funny at the end of the day. I mean, think about it. I mean, here's the article right here. It says Astrobot Dev has good news for PC players. Game Rant. A top exec from PlayStation Studios team Asobi, the developer of Astrobot, has advised PC gamers who want to play the upcoming title to be more vocal. Well, of course, so that maybe his studio may make more money. See, I don't want to put anybody on blast, okay? It's not the funnest thing to do. However, I'm going ahead and looking at this hypocrisy, and, I'm tempted to make another 50 videos documenting developers going hungry after doing or during their exclusivity deals. And we can reiterate it all over again. If these people don't stop and actually focus and maybe buy 2 copies of these games to probably artificially inflate the, sales figures like they do with their exclusives during, the remaster seasons all over the place. I gotta say, if you're a PlayStation fanboy and you want to come out here, saying all this stuff, you gotta understand that you had the hype and you had everything, and y'all you didn't show up. In fact, now everyone is saying it's because Final Fantasy is not really a great game, or it's not did. Sure, but y'all could have still bought it though, right? I mean, since then, Monster Hunter Wilds has come out, taking a bunch of money from everybody and other games too. If you want to be exclusive, stay exclusive. But don't come out whining over here. And, fanboys, don't come out here whining about, nobody's buying your game a year or 2 years later. Or the game that you touted and you carried on your shoulder and ran all over the place saying you don't have this game. I remember when they were saying, let me see you play Final Fantasy on Steam. Let me see you play Final Fantasy 16 on Xbox. Now they're like, oh, it's on Xbox. You better buy it. You better buy it. With all due respect, get the heck out of here. Peace out.